Have you ever imagined that behind the glittering crowns, luxurious gowns, and royal palaces, there were queens who carried a dark, filthy secret? What if I told you that some of the most powerful women in history, those worshipped like goddesses, were known not for their beauty or elegance, but for their unbearable stench that lingered like a curse? This isn't just gossip from the past. This is history's hidden truth. Today, we're pulling back the curtains on the royal world to reveal the four dirtiest queens who smelled so bad that even their closest courtiers avoided them. Their odor was so infamous, it became part of their legacy. Brace yourself, because this journey into royal filth will change how you see history forever. Our story begins in an era when bathing was considered dangerous, perfumes masked sins, and royals believed their divine status placed them above hygiene. But even in such times, these four queens took bad smell to an unthinkable level, so much so that their stench became legendary. From queens who refused to bathe their entire lives, to those whose bodies reeked due to bizarre beauty rituals, prepare to uncover the nauseating truth that even their loyal subjects whispered about in disgust. The first queen on our list ruled in an age of grandeur, but lived in ways that would shock you. She was famed for her beauty and political cunning, but hidden beneath the layers of silk and jewelry was a woman who hadn't bathed in years. Historians describe how her chambers reeked so intensely that servants had to cover their noses with scented cloths just to serve her meals. And yet, her admirers called her divine. Can you imagine sitting beside such royalty while the overwhelming stench suffocated the room? Her belief was simple: bathing was sinful. In her mind, water entering the skin opened pathways for illness and evil spirits. So instead of bathing, she soaked herself in oils and heavy perfumes, layering scent upon scent in a desperate attempt to mask what lay beneath. But nothing worked. When foreign ambassadors visited, they often wrote letters back home describing her unbearable odor in secret codes, fearing punishment if discovered. Even her husband, a king known for his patience, reportedly avoided her chambers for weeks at a time. But this queen wasn't alone. Across Europe, another monarch became infamous for something even worse. She was said to change her undergarments only twice a year, on her birthday and during religious festivals. Just imagine that. Months of sweat, dust, and filth trapped beneath royal gowns weighted with jewels. Historians recount that even her throne, embroidered with gold, smelled so foul that attendants had to sprinkle it with herbs before she Saturday. This queen's court was no better. Her ladies-in-waiting followed her example, shunning baths and embracing the idea that noble skin must never be touched by common water. Guests often fainted during summer banquets from the overwhelming odor in the crowded hall. Yet, strangely enough, no one dared to speak against it openly. After all, who could accuse a queen of smelling bad without risking their head on the chopping block? And then there was the third queen, a woman so feared and adored that her subjects claimed her scent alone could make flowers wilt. Whether this was an exaggeration or not, her hygiene habits, or rather, lack of them, were infamous. It's said that she owned over 300 bottles of perfume, but not a single bar of soap. Her daily routine involved dousing herself in rose water mixed with animal fat to nourish her royal skin. But the combination created a rancid smell that clung to her like a shadow. One servant described in his diary how entering her chamber was like stepping into a suffocating cloud of perfume, sweat, and decay. He wrote, "The scent was so thick it felt as though one might choke upon it, yet none dared cough in her presence." To her, this stench was a mark of regality, proof that she was above the filthy labor of washing. And yet, despite her smell, men adored her. She wielded her power like a weapon, seducing diplomats and controlling alliances, proving that even the foulest odor couldn't stop her ambition. Finally, our fourth queen brings us to perhaps the most shocking case of all. Unlike the others, she wasn't just unhygienic, she was diseased. Suffering from chronic skin infections and untreated wounds, her body gave off such a putrid odor that it was recorded even from several feet away. Her doctors tried everything: ointments of honey and herbs, cloths soaked in vinegar, even burning incense nonstop in her room. Nothing helped. The palace became notorious for its sickly sweet stench, and commoners began calling her the rotting rose behind her back. Her courtiers often fainted or vomited during long audiences, yet she remained oblivious. To her, this was a divine punishment she was destined to bear, proof that she was chosen by God. When she finally died, records claim that even the undertaker struggled as her body's odor worsened during the embalming. Some say this queen's stench was so notorious that future generations used her name as an insult for filth and decay. By now, you might be wondering, how could such powerful women live this way? The truth lies in the bizarre medical beliefs of their times. Bathing was seen as dangerous because doctors thought water could seep into the body and spread deadly diseases. Perfumes and oils weren't luxuries. They were survival tools to mask odors in a world with no plumbing or deodorant. Royals believed their divine status exempted them from such concerns, and in turn, their subjects accepted it as part of their power. Yet, even among filthy royalty, these queens stood apart. Their smells weren't just private embarrassments. They became historical legends, whispered about in corridors and recorded in diaries that survived centuries. And though their names are remembered for their crowns and conquests, their stench is an invisible stain on their legacies. But here's the shocking part. What if I told you that their odors sometimes worked in their favor? In part 2, you'll discover how these queens used their infamy to control politics, silence enemies, and even turn their repulsive smells into symbols of fear and dominance. Prepare yourself, because the next part will reveal how royal filth wasn't just tolerated, it was weaponized. When you think about it, you might assume their unbearable stench would have made them outcasts. But here's the disturbing twist. In their world, their odor became part of their power. It was more than just poor hygiene, it was an unspoken weapon. Imagine standing before a queen whose smell was so overpowering, you could barely breathe, yet you were expected to smile, bow, and pretend you noticed nothing. That sheer discomfort, that silent suffering, created an invisible wall of dominance. These queens didn't just rule by crown. They ruled through fear, control, and even the stench that surrounded them, like an aura. One queen in particular mastered this in ways that seem almost unthinkable today. It's said she held court in stifling chambers filled with incense so thick that courtiers could barely see. But beneath that artificial sweetness, her odor lingered, impossible to escape. Petitioners often rushed through their requests, desperate to flee the suffocating atmosphere. And she loved it. The quicker they spoke, the faster decisions were made in her favor. Her smell became a silent intimidation tactic, forcing even the most defiant nobles into submission. But it wasn't just about fear. In one infamous account, an ambassador from a neighboring kingdom wrote to his king, describing how he was nearly overcome by the stench, but dared not step back. He knew one wrong move, a wrinkled nose, or the faintest gesture of disgust, could have been seen as an insult punishable by death. Instead, he endured the suffocating odor for hours, sweat pouring down his face, until he collapsed the moment he left her chamber. His report, still preserved in archives, describes her smell as a force as commanding as her voice. And then there was the queen who believed her stink was a divine blessing. Convinced that her odor kept away evil spirits and disease, she refused every offer of medicinal baths. She claimed that those who could tolerate her smell proved themselves worthy of her favor. This twisted logic created a dangerous hierarchy in her court. The closer you stood to her, the higher your status, if you could stomach it. Ministers competed for the honor of standing near her throne, some even fainting from the scent, but refusing to move. To her, their suffering was proof of loyalty. One astonishing event even turned her stench into a tool of vengeance. When a rival noblewoman mocked her in secret, the queen invited her to a private dinner. Historians describe how the queen deliberately avoided perfumes that day, allowing her natural odor, sweat, oils, and weeks of unwashed skin to linger freely. By the end of the dinner, the noblewoman was reportedly so nauseated she could barely stand. Rumors spread that this was the queen's way of crushing enemies without raising a sword. Her smell became an unspoken warning. Insult her, and you would pay a price far worse than humiliation. The third queen's case takes an even darker turn. Her skin infections worsened over the years, and doctors' primitive treatments only made her smell more unbearable. Yet, Rather than hiding away in shame, she used it to her advantage. During tense political negotiations, she would sit deliberately, close to opposing envoys, leaning in so near they could hardly breathe. Records show that many times they would agree to terms faster than expected, simply to end the meeting sooner. Whether intentional or not, her stench bent politics to her will, but not everyone could endure it. One foreign prince, sent to court, her for marriage, allegedly fled the palace in the dead of night after just 2 meetings. His letters describe her scent as a punishment worse than any dungeon, claiming it haunted him for weeks after his departure. Yet ironically, this only increased her mystique at home. Her people began to see her as untouchable, too sacred for mortal men, her odor proof of divine uniqueness. And what about their personal lives? Surely, their marriages suffered. Indeed, kings often kept their distance. Some queens maintained separate bedchambers entirely, visited only out of duty. One royal physician even wrote of a king who kept bowls of burning herbs around his bed to mask his wife's scent when she visited. Intimacy was rare, and affection often replaced by ritual and obligation. Yet, none of this diminished their authority. If anything, their husbands' avoidance made them appear even more independent and powerful. It's almost unbelievable. But in their time, odor wasn't simply disgusting. It carried symbolic meaning. For peasants, the smell of sweat and labor was associated with poverty and hardship. For nobles, masking smell with perfumes was a sign of luxury. But these queens existed in a strange in-between. Their stench was not that of commoners, yet not hidden by constant bathing. It was almost otherworldly. One court poet even wrote verses praising a queen's natural musk, comparing it to the wild scent of the earth after rain. Such words may sound romantic, but they reveal something crucial. Her smell was reframed as a mark of raw, primal femininity. In a twisted way, it became part of her allure. She wasn't just a queen, she was an untamed force of nature. And here's the strangest truth of all. Despite everything, these queens were adored. Their portraits show elegance and grace. Their names remain celebrated in history books. The filth, the odor, the discomfort, they were hidden beneath layers of myth and reverence. Even today, when we think of royalty, we picture glittering jewels and perfect beauty, never the reality of unwashed bodies and suffocating stench. Yet behind every jeweled crown was a human being, bound by the same flaws we all share, but magnified by a world that worshipped power over purity. In the end, their smell became more than filth, it became legend. A reminder that history isn't just polished marble statues and shining thrones. It's sweat, it's blood, it's perfume masking rot. These queens ruled not despite their stench, but with it, twisting